Can I talk NFC West for a minute? I'm sorry. I'm obsessed with this.
You just look depressed when it comes to football.
Well, Danny, I was telling you before.
He meant depressed with this, not obsessed with this.
Yeah, I'm depressed with this. I mean obsessed with this. I mean depressed with this. I said to you before the show, I still watch every week all the games, my big TV game, and my split screen and my Sunday ticket. But when your team's stinking, it's hard to feel the same enthusiasm. When you know your team is headed to the postseason, there's a bigger sense of like, oh, this week's fun and all, but January, once the postseason starts, and when your team on the outside looking in, it stinks. So Danny G, I give you so much credit for caring so much when your Raiders stink year after year. I really do. And that might sound like a passive-aggressive insult.
Yeah, that didn't sound nice.
But you're admitting you're tuning out.
But
sounds like you are joining me because you now qualify as a delusional Niner fan.
No, but what I'm saying is,
but that's why I think that gambling has become such a prominent part of the sport. It's because not everybody's team's in it all the time, and people want to be involved and be excited, and that's their only way.
I think what I'm saying, I guess it is a little
gambling and fantasy sports and things like that.
I guess it is a little backhanded, but Danny G, what I'm trying to say is, I applaud your enthusiasm for the NFL when your team is never really in it. Because that just means you love the game so much.
For sure. And you have to look at the small wins, things that are going right on your team, even if it's a very small or short list.
Yeah,
and you have to look towards the draft. And you have to look towards the things, like Max Crosby. And
you can't be fair-weathered.
Tyree Wilson suddenly having 3 sacks in a couple of games. Like small little wins like that, Rich, and then watch a lot of red zone so you could see some really good football out of other teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fair whether it is.
It is if you're not tuning in the same way because your team stinks.
Disagree.
What do you mean? That's the definition.
If my team,
that's the definition.
If the 49ers are losing 38-10
yes.
to the Packers, I went in my backyard and started doing gardening.
You only care when your team is winning and doing good. That's called fair-weathered fan. What do you mean? You're describing that.
Then I'm the biggest fair-weather fan there ever was.
Yes, we know that. Because unless you have action on the game, you're gambling on it, you don't care as much about the matchups or the game. If your team is dominating, then you care. But if your team stinks,
am I still watching?
It's like your Mets. Did he not quit on the Mets and all of a sudden he's back in when they're good? That's fair-weathered fandom. What do you mean you're describing it?
Who's not? When you're not fair-weathered, I think you're an idiot.
Okay, but at least say, I'm a fair-weather fan and I own it, because otherwise you're an idiot.
But Rich is still paying attention, though.
Dan, when it's
he's just more critical.
When
he's not watching.
When it's 31-10,
he's bored by
Packers
it, and I get it.
in the fourth, and I'm like, yeah, babe. I told my wife I'm gonna go in the backyard. I'm gonna finish up the mulch work I was doing earlier. I did put new mulch in the backyard.
Sure.
Does that make me a bad fan because it's 31-10 and I'm like aggravated? I'm like, you guys.
No, it's not competitive at that point. You can turn it off.
That makes me a bad fan?
Do you still check in, though? You'll be like, let me dump this bag and see where we're at.
I peek through the window at the score.
It's normal behavior, but you said you're changing your narrative because we were in the hallway and you're like, you just don't care as much.
Well, it's hard to care as much when your team might not be headed to the postseason. Like you're watching, but
I don't blame you, but it is what it is. That's the definition of a fair-weathered fan.
There is this. Gosh, I feel like I'm in this like world where all these magnets are like opposite of each other. Because I actually think Danny's situation is so unique because the Raiders are such a culture. They're actually more of a culture than any other professional sports team there is.
There is a Raiders culture. You're right.
Yes, there absolutely is. And there's something about that in being a Raiders fan. And I grew up in the state of Wisconsin where there's a Packers culture, but it's not like the Raiders culture. There's something that's just completely unique about that. So kudos to him for dealing with these poor seasons, but it is, I think it's different being a fan from everybody else. And while I am a Covino guy, if you told me this 5 years ago, I'd probably be on Covino's side. The problem is, and you see it a lot in baseball, how are you supposed to care when your team isn't caring and not investing in it?
I think that's fair, man.
And so I think that's the difficulty of it, to Rich's point as well, is why will you choose to be miserable?
Yeah, it's like an Oakland fan or something.
Yeah.
Like they're
how
giving up and they're calling it a season and they're moving and they don't seem to care. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about culture, there are teams that no matter good or bad, like the Cubs, there's a Cubs culture. If they're good, bad, whatever, people show up and it's like, hey, I'm with the Cubs.
Yes.
That's very true.
We lost again.
I'm reading a newspaper at Wrigley.
But to me, if the 49ers are injured, Deebo Samuel showing zero heart, Your star players are
injured. They're not playing exciting. Even if they're losing, they could be exciting. They're not playing exciting football.
But if you're telling me it's 31-10 in the fourth quarter, and I tell my wife, babe, I'm gonna go skim the pool. I need to walk out of the house. That makes me less of a fan. Do you think I want to watch this?
You know, the intriguing thing about this is the guy that it's coming from is it's Covino, because he is such a Yankees fan.
Yeah,
but you would have the excuse of being used to winning. You know, so like there's like the down years that you don't know about.
He doesn't know. He doesn't get it.
Yeah,
right.
He doesn't get it.
I've said this for years.
But I would also say to the fact of
they didn't win a World Series till I was in college.
You act like I won my whole life. Oh, they didn't win a World Series? You sound like such an ass right now.
I watched my whole life until they won.
A down year for the Yankees is 85 wins and they missed the playoffs. That's a down year for the Yankees.
I watched my entire life until then and still have.
Get the freak out of here. You are a guy in your 40s that is, you have more World Series than one hand. Get out of my face.
They haven't won in 15 years and I'm still watching.
Get out of my face. Yeah, but they win 90 to 100 games every year.
But they aren't winning championships.
Oh, God. Choke yourself.
Look, it is what it is, dude. If your team's not passionate about winning, I get it. It's hard for the fan to be. But if you're only there for the good times and the victories, that's what a fair-weathered fan is. I didn't make the definition.
Well, then I think a fair-weather fan has the right idea.
Okay, then that's fine. Then that's your statement, and I can't debate that.
I think if you're Raiders different, like you said, because it's very culture with the Raiders. But
even though I think that's a character flaw, and you're a man of great character, you've been a Mets fan your whole life.
It might be a whole culture, Rich, but the losses still hurt just as much. The one thing I'll say is, I feel like, as a season ticket holder in Oakland all those years, you know, there were several seasons where they were a few games under 500, and I still sat there with the Seagulls, and I took it head first. And in my mind, I was like, this is going to make me tougher, because when they have a winning season, I'm going to enjoy it that much more. And then John Gruden came around, turned things around. Suddenly, we're playing the AFC Championship game right there in front of me, and I was like, I was here on, a couple of years ago when we only had 3 wins. Now I'm here at the AFC Championship game.
No one's stat checking. No one's asking you, Danny. I learned that. I feel like this is a lesson I've learned later in life. No one checks if you were there during the rough years, and it's not a bragging right.
But you know it, though.
Guess what?
You were there.
When I watched the 49ers, I don't know, throw Jim Tomsula out there as a head coach.
Now you're describing front-running fan, because if you're only there when they're winning, that's what that is.
What I'm saying is, when I watched garbage 49ers teams, Jeff Druckenmiller and Jim Tomsula as the head coach, and the Chip Kelly experiments. When I watched then, when the Niners got good, did anyone check the receipts if I was there when they were bad? No, so who cares?
Well, in life, I think whoever you're in a relationship with will check those receipts. Are you just there when times are good and you bail when times are tough?
This is leisure. It's not a marriage.
Well, I'm just saying it's a part of one's character. What you're describing is fair-weathered and front-running. That's what it is. You could like it or not like it. That's what it is. And things that made you go, I'm just switching gears here.
Come back to me when the Yankees win 60 to 70 games 4 years in a row. And then you could say, I've been there. Because in your life, I could probably think that there might be 1 or 2 years possible.
But come to me when that's my fault. I chose to be a Yankees fan. I was born into it when I was a baby. I didn't even choose it.
So you just got lucky.
Yeah. So you can't criticize I come from a Yankees family.
But it's like a person that was born into money that's like, why isn't everyone rich? Like, that's what you're saying.
Then take a stand and say, I'm not rooting for the Mets anymore. I don't know what to tell you.
What I'm saying is,
but you're the guy that also was like, I'm done with the Mets. I'm done. And the second they got hot again, you were all in again. Because I don't like that. I think that's lame.
You don't know it.
Does it? Well, then fine.
But you don't know it. Again, you're
fine. I don't think I would do that.
I used to work with a guy.
I would be frustrated.
I used to work with a guy, right? This is a true story. I worked with a guy that had a lot of money in radio. Like, one of the bosses was a big investor. He had a lot of money. He would tell the young 20-somethings at the company, like, hey, why don't you get an apartment here in Midtown Manhattan? And the employees have to be like, my paycheck before taxes can't get me that apartment. I'm an entry-level guy. And he's like, wait, why don't you just live there? And we'd be like, does this guy have any clue what life costs? You have no clue what it's like to lose. You're a Yankees fan. Your bad season is 88 and 70-something and 88 and 74.
You act like the 80s and everything to 95 didn't exist.
Yeah,
they didn't win Jack Diddley squat. I was a very conscious and aware adult by that point.
Different
I don't
when you're a
understand
kid
what
and
you're talking
adult, too.
Yeah. Yeah, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the park with my kids. If the 49ers are losing 31-10 in the third quarter, I'm going to be like, hey, kids, you want to go hit some wiffle balls in the front yard? I don't got the, what am I going to...
I'm not saying to put your weak-ass 49ers ahead of your kids. I'm just telling you what you're describing.